Welcome back to The Journey. We're happy to have Funke Odoemene, and I think I said that right this time. And she's going to share her journey with us, and I have a lot of questions because I really don't know very much about you. I will say that I sat behind your family at Mass one Sunday, and it was so distracting because your family is so beautiful and they're so loving to each other, and your little girls were so cute. I could not concentrate. Sorry. But I think God forgives us for things like that, right? I was just so thankful that I could sit behind you. Anyway, welcome, and I really am curious how you found St. Joseph and how you got to us.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we moved to the area in 2020, around August or September, just depending on when we closed and finally moved into the house. But we live nearby, and my husband's mother is a very devout and practicing Catholic, and so one of her visits to us, but she lives in, sorry, I should have said that, she lives in New Jersey. Okay. So she comes here periodically just to visit and spend time with us, but she is the one that actually found the church, or realized,
well, thank you, Mama.
Yeah, that this church was the closest one to the house, and so she started to go, and we would often go with her when she's around. So that's how we just started going, and I would say it was pretty much based on those visits, and then we've, as a family, me personally as a family, been on a spiritual journey, I would say, pretty much since moving here, and we now regularly come, but it started out as just sort of occasional visits when Grandma is in town, so she found it.
Oh boy, that's a new one. Usually it's the other way around. I don't know, but where did you live before this? Were you in Maryland?
Yes, so we've been in Maryland since 2017, but we were in Reisterstown prior to moving to Eldersburg, and but my husband and I actually met in New York, so we met and started dating in New York City, where I had lived there since 2010. So we were in New York until 2017, and then moved to Maryland in 2017. Mm-hmm. So,
well, did you grow up in New York, or how did you get
so
there?
I actually
we're going backwards in time here, I realize, but
yeah, no,
okay.
It's all good. I grew up in the UK, so I was actually born in the States, but raised predominantly in the UK. So I was there from age 5 until 2008, and so I moved to the US in 2008, and my parents had actually moved just a couple of years before that in 2005, and so my parents live in upstate New York. Oh. So they lived there. I did a master's program in upstate New York at SUNY Albany, and then moved to New York City in 2010 and started my journey there, and then my husband and I met in 2013 in the city.
Okay, yeah. Wow. The big city, and you found each other.
Yes.
Wow, how exciting that must have been.
Yeah, it was, you just have to say it was God, basically. I don't know how else.
The best kind.
How else to describe it, because it's very difficult dating in a city that is multiple millions of people, and a lot of them are transient and aren't really looking necessarily for serious relationships and things like that. So we both met really through a chance get together. It was an event for Nigerian people, or people that want to be included in that cultural community, to meet, and they were hosting a dinner event at an Indian restaurant in the city, and both of us, just without knowing anyone or each other or anyone in common, had just separately gone to that event, and we sat next to each other at the dinner, and that was basically it.
And we do have to correct, it was not chance. It was definitely not chance.
Yeah, right.
But it was unpredicted, that's for sure.
Not predicted, but definitely must have been God's plan, because I couldn't have imagined meeting my husband at on that day.
Yeah, wow. What a wonderful story. Very romantic and very encouraging for all the single women out there, right? Okay. So we got that covered. Now, I'm interested in the spiritual journey. Did that just start since you came here and thanks to mother-in-law, or were you sort of raised in a way?
Yes, so that's a great question. That's a great question. And so this is where, now just speaking for myself, my personal journey, even though my husband's does interweave into that at a certain point. But for myself, I was raised not Catholic, not Christian. I was raised in another religion, Ekankar. And so my parents, they actually had been raised Catholic, interestingly enough. And so they left the faith. And by the time I was born, they were practicing Ekankar and still do. And so that was what my brother and I were born and raised into. And so I would say I was pretty much, fully immersed in that. If I have to describe it, because most people heard about it, it's a religion that I think is more aligned with the Hindu style philosophy, but it was a new age religion that came about, I believe, it can be looked up, but in the sort of 70s or 60s, around the mid-60s is when it was formally founded, but it draws a lot from the Eastern religious practices, so it believes in like reincarnation and karma and things like that. So it, I would say, it just sort of acknowledges that there are many religions. It acknowledges Christianity, but it's not connected in any way. It doesn't refer to Jesus and the Christian teachings as part of what they adopt, but it just sort of acknowledges that there are all these other religions, but it presents itself as a more, I guess, individual spiritual path to finding God. So that was how I was raised, and I would say it was I was very much fully in that. And I describe myself as very kind of spiritual from a young age. I remember just feeling very connected to that. And it's interesting because when I would say, I've been thinking about this a lot actually recently with some of what we might get onto later, but my first introduction to Jesus and Christianity came through my what we call secondary school upbringing in the UK. So I mentioned earlier that I was raised there, and so from age 11 to 18 I was in one school, and it was called Rochester Grammar School for girls. It was just a secular school, but it we wore uniform and all of that, but we actually would sing hymns every morning. So we had morning assembly and we would sing hymns. And
Christian hymns, even though it was a secular school.
It was not a religious school, but looking back on it, it's as if I had almost like a Catholic school upbringing, but without it being formally labeled as such. And so every year I used to play violin, and we would go to the cathedral every Christmas time, and I'd play at the cathedral and all the Christmas, hymns, songs, all of that. So it was not explicit, but it was very much a part of our daily life, and I still remember a lot of those hymns till today. Wow. So it's interesting that I think just looking back on things, that a seed was planted in me from that age 11 in a really sort of impactful way, that a lot of that I feel like is still part of what is brings me a lot of joy now when I look back, and I can still remember a lot of the hymns, and I would say that opened the door to Jesus, Christianity, but it was very much kind of in the background because I was heavily into Ekankar and the religion that I was practicing at home. And so then the other thing that happened recently was that, so fast forward, I went to university in the UK, and then in 2006 I'd actually decided to do a second undergraduate course. This was a course in mathematics with French. I don't know if it's relevant to this conversation, but at the time I had met some Christian friends on campus, and then we got quite close. They were Protestant Christians, and something just happened to me where I just felt like, okay, this just makes sense. Like, Christianity, I wanted to start looking into it. At the time, I think I had started to question Ekankar in general and just wanted to know more about how it started, like what some of the origin story, I guess, of the religion itself. And I started looking things up, and I just felt like, I learned some things that I wasn't really aware of, and I kind of got into I would say almost like a spiritual crisis around it, because I was just very much confused by a lot of things that seemed like new information that were significant to me, and I wasn't able to really move past it. And then I also was around people that were talking to me about Christianity, and I can't recall all the exact sequence of events, but I ended up getting a Bible, going to some church that was nearby, and just feeling very much like this makes sense. And I didn't realize until recently that in the Bible that I bought, it was just a small Bible, but I'd kept it all these years. So that was in 2006, and I'd written in it, that this day in November of 2006, I commit myself to Jesus, or something like that. That I profess my own sort of faith there, and I'd written it down, and I didn't know that I had done that until I found the Bible maybe like a month or so ago.
Wow.
And I just saw it there. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so interesting. So I'd say that was the next major milestone of feeling like personally, through a Protestant lens, the love for Jesus came into my own heart then. And then this actually, I was practicing Christianity the way that it made sense to me, just through the Protestant churches, but I was a bit confused. I didn't know where I was supposed to go, why one church versus the next. It was all a little bit confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you did so much on your own that, Jesus, I would think to say now, was drawing you in, but you were pretty much on your own in formation.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what it felt like. And so I then actually moved to the States in 2008, as I've noted. So in that time, it then actually became very challenging for me, because I moved in with my parents for the first year of my master's program. And that's when I would say I had another kind of spiritual crisis, where it was the conflict of okay, I'm not aligned now with my family in the spiritual path.
That must have been really hard.
It was rough. It was really intense, and it felt really kind of isolating and confusing, and it was a rough experience, to be honest, that kind of left a mark. It just felt like, this feeling of having this unconditional love suddenly felt conditional. It was rough.
Oh, wow. Oh, my.
It was rough. So that, I would say, my faith, pretty much, my Christian journey pretty much came to a stop.
Yes. Well,
and
that would certainly be difficult.
It wasn't because I was being told, don't do this, but I could just feel the shift in the energy within my family. Right. And I would say my faith wasn't on a solid footing. So it was, like I said, just trying to piece some things together by myself. Bible and some kind of churches. I've now moved country, not really around, Christians. It just felt that it's the combination of things, not having the solid footing, and then feeling that I'm going against, what everything I've been raised, my family, I'm looking with them, and certain things they would want to practice or pray in the way that Ekankar does. I then would try to opt out, but I'm in the same space, and it was just
feel
really
guilty for wanting to do one thing.
Yeah, it was a lot of weird emotions, and really uncomfortable feeling, very uncomfortable, and then also confusing. So it just fell away, and I went back to Ekankar, and just pretty much had been doing that from around, when was it? Somewhere in the 08, 09, up to I think around 2010. I think I managed to but it was like a diminishing experience that then just kind of faded away up till around that 2010. And then I just would say I was pretty much just back to what I knew, back to Eckankar, but my relationship with it felt like it changed, because it, like I said, when I had that experience in 2006, it left its own mark, but I would still work with the religion to the extent that I could. And I would say it's interesting, because just sort of putting a note to the side, I've had a lot of challenges recently with trying to process everything that I've done my whole life, feeling like, was this all a waste? Like, why was I, doing all these things? But I think the takeaway that I've just been getting is that it was preparation for me to really embrace the church and Christ more fully, and that I really came to embrace and grapple with all the questions I had, and I've been able to, and I'm still doing it, fleshing them all out, and just facing it all head on, and just really turning it all to God and just saying, please, use this and help me make sense of it all, so that I can just feel that solid footing that I was missing. So
you went through a time of, it sounds, I just thought of an earthquake. It sounds like your earth separated, and you were sort of lost in the middle of that, and that makes it felt like very difficult. But that's something that so many of us go through, and I think we have to go through before we own it. Right? I mean, young people, like you said, in the university, that's a critical time for a lot of people, when they begin to ask, who am I? And, what do I believe in? Why do I believe it? But you had the extra layer, I guess, of a religion that wasn't common in your surroundings, that you had to grapple with and decide, am I going to go with my family, or am I going to go with myself? That's quite a choice to have to make.
It's intense. And so I would say I can kind of fast forward from that 2010 until, I would say, the next milestone was when my husband and I got engaged, and we're trying to plan our wedding. And so some of that, there's more to come on that story, actually, because my husband was raised, so this is a good point to note, that my husband is Catholic and was raised Catholic. I'd noted that, I guess, by his mom. But he was born and raised Catholic, was very strongly Catholic until he went to university. And then it was almost in a similar way. He was a science person. He'd gone to study biomedical engineering far away from home. As soon as he got to campus, he went to find the nearest church and was, invested in continuing that. But then just gradually just started chipping away, and he didn't really have many Catholics around him. There were other Christians, but then, we recently had a conversation about this, and he just noted that, I just asked, what sort of happened with your faith, because ultimately he ended up becoming a lapsed Catholic and just was not practicing religion for many years. And it was just sort of that gradual, I would say, the world just came in, and there wasn't necessarily a Catholic support system or other peers that are there to keep the faith alive, and just fell away
that
from
support,
the church. So
that support is so critical. I mean, we hear it a lot. I mean, you think that you've got all you need within you, but you can't. We were not made to travel alone through this life and in our faith.
So when he and I met, I was then pretty much coming out of my Christian Protestant Christian side, and then he was lapsed and not practicing religion, and we just met, and our relationship formed kind of outside of religion, and we just pretty much just connected on a heart level and just formed our relationship without really reference to religion. He knew that I was in Eckankar. I knew he was raised Catholic but not practicing. It didn't, affect either of our.
It wasn't really a factor at that point
to each other. But when we then wanted to get married, that was then where it came to light. Like, how do we actually do this?